The ongoing war in Ukraine has become one of the most significant conflicts in modern history, not just because of its geopolitical ramifications, but because of the sheer complexity of the tactics being used on both sides. One of the most striking features of this war is the way Ukraine has been able to push back against a much larger adversary by attacking Russia's logistical and supply chains. Today we're going to talk about one of the latest and perhaps most significant developments in this area, the derailment of a Russian military freight train in the Belgorod region. But this isn't just about a single attack, it's part of a broader strategy that has been undermining the Russian war effort for months, if not years. So buckle up, folks. We're about to dive deep into the world of sabotage, rail warfare, and how it's changing the face of modern combat. A blow to Russian logistics, the Belgorod train derailment. On September 10th, a freight train derailed in the Belgorod region of Russia, a result of what is believed to be a joint operation between Ukrainian Defense Intelligence and Special Operations Forces. According to sources, the train was carrying critical supplies to the Russian military. Now let me tell you, when you're trying to conduct a large-scale military operation, the last thing you want is for your supply lines to get cut. But that's exactly what happened. 11 wagons and the locomotive were overturned, rendering the railway artery useless and forcing Russian military planners to cancel several other trains that were critical to the war effort. You can almost imagine the chaos back at Russian military headquarters when they realized, wait a minute, we're missing an entire train. Now, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. In fact, since the start of the war, there have been numerous sabotage attempts targeting Russian railways, supply depots, and logistical hubs. This is where the brilliance of the Ukrainian resistance comes into play. They're not just fighting the war on the battlefield, they're fighting it behind enemy lines as well, disrupting supply routes that are vital to Russia's war machine. And if you're thinking, how can derailing a single train really make a difference in a war this big? Well, let's just say that in a war of attrition, every little bit counts. A history of sabotage. This recent train derailment is just the latest in a series of sabotage efforts by Ukraine and other anti-Russian forces. According to Ukrainian intelligence, several rail lines in Russia have been targeted since the start of the war. Explosions, fires, derailments, you name it, it's happened. And while Ukraine hasn't always officially claimed responsibility for these acts, they've made it clear that these disruptions are a key part of their strategy to weaken the Russian military. One of the most interesting aspects of this war is how it's forcing us to rethink modern combat. This isn't just a battle of tanks and soldiers. It's a battle of supply lines, logistics, and intelligence. And if you can cripple your enemy's ability to move supplies and reinforcements to the front lines, you can severely weaken their ability to fight. In this case, the sabotage isn't limited to just one region. Russia's entire railway network has been targeted at various points, from Belgorod to Moscow and even Crimea. Just a few months ago, there was another derailment in Crimea that severely disrupted Russian military logistics. And when you start to add up all these attacks, the cumulative effect becomes clear. Every derailment, every explosion, every fire means that Russia's military is struggling to get the supplies it needs to keep fighting. And that's exactly what Ukraine wants. The role of partisans and special forces. It's important to understand that these sabotage efforts aren't just the work of the Ukrainian military. Ukrainian partisans have also played a key role in disrupting Russian logistics. These are everyday citizens, many of whom lived under Russian occupation, who have taken it upon themselves to fight back. Armed with homemade explosives, knowledge of local terrain, and a fierce determination to see their country freed from Russian control, these partisans have been wreaking havoc on Russian supply lines. Imagine being a Russian soldier in occupied Ukraine. You're already dealing with a hostile local population, constant attacks from Ukrainian forces, and now, every time a train rolls into town, there's a good chance it might explode. That's the kind of psychological warfare that can really demoralize an occupying force. And let's not forget the role of Ukrainian Special Forces. These highly trained units have been working alongside partisans and intelligence operatives to carry out some of the most daring sabotage missions of the war. In many cases, they're the ones planting the explosives, gathering intelligence, and making sure these attacks hit their intended targets. It's a dangerous job, but one that has paid off in spades for Ukraine. The ripple effect on Russian morale. You might be wondering, okay, so Ukraine is blowing up a bunch of trains. Big deal. What does this mean for the broader war effort? Well, the impact of these attacks goes far beyond just derailing a few trains. Every time a Russian supply line is hit, it forces the Russian military to divert resources, manpower, and attention to fixing the problem. And when you're already stretched thin, as the Russian military is, that can be a huge problem. But perhaps even more importantly, these sabotage attacks are having a profound effect on Russian morale. Soldiers on the front lines know that their supplies are coming in by train. When they hear about trains getting blown up left and right, it makes them wonder if they're going to get the ammunition, food, and medical supplies they need to keep fighting. That kind of uncertainty can lead to fear, and fear leads to mistakes. And in war, even a small mistake can be fatal. Russia's response: a struggling railway network. Of course, Russia isn't just sitting idly by while Ukraine blows up its trains. They've been working to repair the damaged rail lines and restore their logistics network. But here's the thing, it's not that easy. Every time they fix one rail line, another one gets hit. It's like playing a game of whack-a-mole, except instead of moles, it's Ukrainian Special Forces, and instead of a mallet, you've got a broken railway system. To make matters worse for Russia, many of these attacks are happening deep inside Russian territory, far away from the front lines. This means that Russian security forces have to stretch their resources even further to protect these vital supply routes. And when you're already fighting a war on one front, the last thing you want is to have to fight another war on your own territory. Russian media has been quick to downplay the impact of these sabotage attacks. But the truth is, they're taking a significant toll on the country's military and civilian infrastructure. And while Russia may be able to repair the damage in the short term, the long-term impact of these attacks could be devastating. The broader implications for modern warfare. So what does all of this mean for the future of warfare? Well, one thing is clear: logistics are more important than ever. In the past, wars were won and lost on the battlefield. But in today's world, wars are being fought in the shadows, in the supply lines, and in the infrastructure that supports a country's military. And as Ukraine has shown, you don't need a massive army to cripple your enemy. You just need to hit them where it hurts, in their ability to move troops, supplies, and equipment. This is a lesson that other countries are likely to take to heart. In the future, we can expect to see more and more emphasis placed on disrupting an enemy's logistics network, whether through cyber attacks, sabotage, or even targeted strikes on infrastructure. And for countries like Russia, which rely heavily on railways to move their military, this could be a major vulnerability. International repercussions and sabotage beyond Ukraine. The effects of this sabotage warfare aren't limited to Ukraine and Russia. Other countries have also felt the sting of sabotage, particularly in the form of cyber attacks and arson attacks on infrastructure. There have been accusations against Russia for sabotage in places like the UK, Germany, and the Baltic states. And this is where the global nature of modern warfare comes into play. What happens in one part of the world can have ripple effects far beyond the borders of the conflict zone. Norway's spy chief, Vice Admiral Niels Andreas Stensons, recently warned about Moscow's hybrid warfare campaign, suggesting that the risk level has changed. This highlights the fact that warfare today is no longer confined to traditional battlefields. It's being fought in cyberspace, on railways, and even in the minds of civilians and soldiers alike. The importance of Allied support. As Ukraine continues its fight against Russia, the importance of international support cannot be overstated. Countries like Lithuania have stepped up in a big way, providing everything from armored personnel carriers to winter gear. Just recently, Lithuania announced another round of military aid, including M113 armored vehicles and spare parts, to help Ukraine in its demining efforts. This aid is crucial because it not only provides Ukraine with the material support it needs to continue fighting, but it also sends a message to Russia: the world is watching and it's not going to stand by while you invade a sovereign nation. Conclusion: a war fought on multiple fronts. At the end of the day, the war in Ukraine is being fought on multiple fronts. Yes, there are battles taking place in the streets of cities like Bakhmut and Kherson, but there's also a war being fought in the shadows, on railway lines, in cyber networks, and in the hearts and minds of the soldiers and civilians involved in this conflict. The derailment of a Russian military freight train in Belgorod may seem like a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it's part of a much larger strategy that Ukraine is using to undermine Russia's ability to wage war. And as we've seen time and time again, these small victories can add up to something much larger: the eventual defeat of an invading force that underestimated the resolve and ingenuity of its opponent. So what do you think about this topic? Please let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can stay informed about new videos. Thanks for watching.